Hi, welcome to the DIY Photo Organizing podcast. I'm Fiona from Photo Helper.
And I'm Chantal from Simply in Order Photo Organizing. Imagine you can find any photo at any time at the click of a button. We are here to show you how.
So let's get started. Well, welcome to another episode of DIY Photo Organizing podcast. We're thrilled to have you here listening to us. Hi, Chantal.
Hi, Fiona.
And hi to Darla.
Hi, Fiona and Chantal.
Hi. We're thrilled today to introduce a beautiful guest speaker that we have today, and a very important topic, I believe, that we're looking forward to jumping into. But firstly, I'd just love to introduce Darla. Darla is a colleague of ours in the worldwide APO organization that we all belong to. And look, she's someone that I definitely look up to and enjoy getting posts from. Just a really informative lady that has done a huge body of work, not just in the photo organizing world, but also in the professional organizing world as well. So there's a lot of details. We'd love you to check out her website. She has started an organization that is called Heartwork Organizing. So we'll put all the links in the show notes, but without a further ado, we would love to introduce Darla. And firstly, Darla, we would love to just ask if you could share with our listeners just a little bit about your passion behind your business and what got you started in this world of organising.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much. Yeah, so my business is called Heartwork Organizing, and people often ask where that name came from. And actually, I call myself a corporate refugee. I was in the corporate world, as a lot of us were, and did that for a dozen years. And when it was time to leave, the phrase kept rattling around in my head. I wanted to do work that came from the heart. And so that's where my business name came from. And that was, oh my gosh, 15 years ago.
Wow.
And it started out like many small businesses do, sort of at the kitchen table. And now I have a staff of, right now I have 3, it goes up and down, sort of changes, but I have just a fabulous staff of employees that works with me. We're based outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we're in a metro area, and we work with people in their homes and in their businesses. We'll organize everything from sock drawers to kitchens to home offices. We were in a home office today. We give, we love working with homeowners who have cats. We love having fun with people and their pets. And so I guess 6 years ago, APO was at one of the professional organizer conferences. I go to both conferences every year now. And so Kathy Nelson, who you might have mentioned before, have probably interviewed for this podcast, or will, I'm sure, if you haven't.
Yes.
Anyway, so she was at our conference talking about photo organizing. I thought, oh yeah, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I'll join for a year and learn everything I need to know and be done with that. And I really had no serious interest in getting into photo organizing. Well, 6 or so years later, here I am. Photo organizing is one of the fastest growing parts of our business. And it's so interesting. We love doing it. All of my staff, love doing it. We just finished a huge project with so far it's about 15,000 pieces of information that we've organized. Anyway, we love doing it. We just love helping people get to the point where they can enjoy their photos again. So that's a little bit about me. I mean, I have 2 organizing books. You can get them on Amazon. And yes, you can get them on Amazon Australia or Amazon wherever you live, in all the different international Amazon stores. It's called Organizing Your Home with Sort and Succeed. And we also have Organizing Your Kitchen with Sort and Succeed. And then late this year, early next year, we will also have Organizing Your Home Office with Sort and Succeed. So
fantastic.
It's busy around here, but we like it that way.
That's great. And we'll put those links in the show notes too for people to be able to find them easily.
Right.
That's wonderful. Thank you. It's amazing. I love just the detail that you've gone into and the breadth of experience that you've had too.
Yeah.
And it brings us to the topic of today, and that really is to help people that are looking at organising their photos themselves, but they've found themselves in a situation where they've separated from their partner.
Yep.
So, like we were talking a little bit before, sort of like a splitsville situation, somewhere where either through a marriage or not, or just a group of people, families, there's a whole range of sensitive issues that really brings up. But
Yeah.
We find ourselves in a situation where we've got precious photos and memories, and there's often one copy, and what do people do? And so, we know that you've had firsthand experience with this. You deal with this in your business. And so we just wanted to talk about how you go about dealing with those things from a digital point of view and from the physical photos. So can you just give us a bit of an overview initially? We've got a few questions, but just sort of how do you tackle these types of projects when they come up in your business?
Yeah, so you're right. I do sadly have, well, I mean, it all turned out well, but I have firsthand experience going through a split divorce. It's been a long time now. It was way before I started my business, way before we were all walking around with supercomputers in our back pockets. But I did go there. I did lose some precious memories because the divorce was ugly, and he did not play nice, and so I lost some of my memorabilia. When that was the kind of thing that could easily have been scanned in today's environment and passed back over to me. But I have also, having that experience in my history, we tend to find ourselves, I think you guys have probably experienced this too, but when we find ourselves working with a client and we have something like that in our background, they tend to trust us a little bit more. And so they'll, share with us what they're going through in their divorce. And so I have had a couple of clients who have been going through their divorce and have opened up to me. And so we've had to talk about, the nitty gritty of, should I give him the pictures? Should I give him the physical pictures? Should I give him the digital? Should I negotiate to try and get 2 copies of all of our pictures as a family so that we can all have them? When's the last time he even looked at a picture? Does he even care? Should I even bring it up, or does he want me to go to a lot of expense? So in thinking of all of these questions, I kind of I came up with 4, especially if somebody's listening to this show and they're going through it right now. I kind of want them to separate it into 4 categories. So 1 is legal. 2 is moral. Do I have a moral obligation to share, or does he or she have a moral obligation to share? The emotional piece of the puzzle, which may be completely, wacky, or it may just not have relationship to anything in reality. Your emotions are valid, whatever they are. And especially when you're going through a life change like a divorce, your emotions are your emotions, but they will change, I promise you. And then the fourth piece is kind of from a legacy standpoint or a genealogical standpoint. Your family pictures, especially if you have a long history with somebody and you're going through that split. Your history isn't just your history, it's other people's history too. So those are kind of the 4 categories that I was breaking it down. And I know we'll talk about all of these on the show, but legal, moral, emotional, and genealogical. Does that sort of resonate with you guys?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's helpful, even just to start before you talk about those, just to even think, okay, just take a deep breath and know, all right, there's some practical things that we can look at, and let's jump right in.
Right.
What are your sort of ways of categorizing that from the legal perspective?
Yeah. So again, nobody on here is a lawyer, I don't think. And a couple of things to think about. Number 1, in some of the forums, I did do some research on this as well. And some of the forums that I went into, people were saying, do I have a legal obligation to give him the pictures or give her the pictures. And the question came up about copyright. Copyright isn't really, I think, a factor in a split. Copyright really just says who owns the original picture and who can profit from it. That's not really the same as having marital property. So I kind of think, you kind of want to set that aside. However, the next part of that legal equation, I think, is who has the pictures in their possession. That's very much a question when you go through a divorce proceeding. Who has things in their possession, and then who has a right to them. And then we're going to get to this in just a second, but with pictures, it's very different from who gets grandma's silver or who gets the, high-end electronics or whatever. There's not just one asset here. As we know, as photo organizers, even a DIYer can do a decent scan of any picture or of lots of pictures. So this isn't a binary on off, if he has it, I can't have it sort of thing. The wonderful thing about going through a split in this day and age is you don't have to say, if you get it, I don't have it. You can say, even if you're in a ugly, litigious, really malevolent situation, you can, through your attorneys, your mediator, your counselor, whoever you're working with, you can say, we have this family asset and I don't want to divide it. I want to copy it. And so we both should end up whole on this particular asset. And when I talk about this particular asset, I mean the photo library, the photo history, or the memorabilia history. So let me just say that right up front. It's very different from other assets that you might have to divide in a divorce. And
so,
I think that's fabulous.
Yeah. So, Darla, can I just ask, from your experience, have you found that couples or, whoever's going through this situation have actually written that into an agreement then as in a proceeding legally?
Yeah. So I haven't had, I'll be honest, I haven't had clients who I've been, sort of coaching at that point in time and that point, where they're actually negotiating their divorce. But I can tell you from experience that you can negotiate anything you want into your divorce agreement. There is no standard divorce agreement. Okay. So when I was getting divorced, we had a St. Bernard and we had to decide on custody of the St. Bernard. That's not, not everybody's going to have that in their divorce decree, but we did. So if it's important to you, or you think it's going to be important to him, or more importantly, if it's going to be something you're going to fight about, if it's like one more, thorn in your side, I would say go to your counselor, your mediator, your lawyer, and just say, look, I don't want to fight about this. Money will fix it. Let's hire a professional organizer, or let's send the whole shoebox out, or let's, have him or her pay me to buy a hard drive and I'll copy the whole thing on to a hard drive and hand it over. It's only money, right? And so you don't want to be fighting 3, 5, 10 years from now about something stupid that could have not been divided but been shared as a whole.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
Yep.
And so I want to talk technically just for a second about how we do that, like really quickly, if we have time.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So, you've talked about this on your show before, but maybe not in the divorce concept, right? So, so whatever platform you're using, if you're on the Apple platform, it's going to be iCloud. If you're an Android user, it might be Google Photos. You might not even be that technically adept. You might just have photos sitting on your phone or on a bunch of old computers in your home office. Wherever your photos are, all you really need is time and a hard drive. And if you can plug in a hard drive to your computer and copy over the number of folders where your photos sit, and you may not, like, as you're listening to this, you may not really know where all of those photos sit, but this actually, divorce can have silver linings. Splitting up from somebody you've been with for a long time can have a silver lining, and this may be one of them. It may force you just to sit down and go find your photos and copy them onto an external hard drive. And that may sound so complex. It may sound like something you don't know how to do or have never done before. This may force the issue for you. And if you're a DIYer, you will feel so accomplished after doing it.
Yeah.
It's literally copying and pasting like you've done with Word files or Excel files your whole life. It's the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to do it, if you feel so overwhelmed, you can hire somebody. You can hire the local tech guy in your community, or you can go find an APO member anywhere in the world.
Exactly.
So you don't have to do it yourself, and it is completely doable.
Yeah.
So, Darla, this is, of course, we're talking about the digital photos now, but oftentimes people do still have the printed photos or bulky photo albums.
Yes.
What do you suggest doing with that? Because that would take a bit more time to sort and scan and what have you.
It does.
Than when they're already digital.
Yeah, it does. And if you've been married for longer, or you've been with somebody for more than 10 years, you will have that old stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I worked with just as an example, I worked with a woman, we'll call her Susan.
Yep.
And on the first appointment, that's what we were looking at. We were looking at her physical photos and trying to get them in order. They were all kind of jumbled in, shoe boxes and plastic bags. We've all seen the mess, right? And the first appointment, I had no idea there was anything else going on. We were just going to organize these photos. And I looked at them and counted them. Oops, sorry. And I looked at them and counted them and estimated that we had about 7,000 photos. So I use a memory box that holds about 2,400 photos. And I said, let me go ahead and order these boxes for you. And we, sorry, my computer's doing something here. I don't want it to shut us off in the middle. So I ordered these 3 boxes. We started sorting her photos, and then I came back for appointment number 2, and she was in tears. At some point in the appointment, she broke down in tears and said, I knew this was coming, but now it's real. I've just been served with divorce papers. And so she said, I'm not even sure I want to do this project because, I'm dealing with all these physical photos, like you said, Chantal, and it's a lot of work, and I don't know who's going to pay for it. And, she was emotionally raw, like we all would be. But she said, let's go ahead and continue on in this appointment. So then I went back for appointment number 3, and she said, you know what? The process of looking at the physical pictures was amazing because it reminded me that our kids, who were at that point, at the point we were working together, they were in college. She said, our kids, and looking at the photos and all the family vacations, it reminded me that things are bad now, but they weren't always. Like, we really were happy back in the day. And the photos are the proof. So I said to her, okay, so what are we going to do with the photos then? You have to make a decision about, who's going to get the photos, whether you're going to digitize them, what are we going to do? And so in this particular case, and there are different answers to this, but in Susan's particular case, what she decided to do was to go through those, 7,000-ish pictures. She picked out what she would call the A pictures. And so we use the ABCs. The A pictures are the ones that you would put time and money into putting into an album. The B pictures are okay, but they're not your favorites. And the C pictures are the ones that maybe you would can or throw away. And so she had separated, during our work together, she had kind of separated the A's and the B's. And she said, you know what? He has never once asked me for pictures. I don't think he's ever looked at our family pictures. But just to take the high road, I'm going to hand him the B pictures. They were already sort of organized chronologically. She said, I want to keep the A pictures. I don't want to scan them right now. I'm just going to keep them. I'm going to hand him the bee pictures, and I think he will be happy with that. And I think truly he's probably going to put them in a shoebox and put them in a closet and never look at them again. But I know that I will have done the right thing.
Mm.
And so that was one way to handle it. Now there are other families that when they get to this point, they will work with an attorney or whoever and say, we're going to hire a professional organizer. We're going to send everything out to scan. So you take that same, 5 to 10,000 photos and you send it out to scan. And it's, truly it's a couple $1,000s. If you've ever been through a divorce, that number does not scare you because there's so many other bigger assets being split up.
Yeah.
So it's really easy for the keeper of the photos, usually it's the mom, to say, here's the entire collection. I'm going to, give it to somebody. They don't have to hand it over to their spouse, especially they may not want to if things are really, if there's an animosity going on right then. They might say, look, I'm going to take it to a professional organizer. I will get an estimate. I will get them scanned, and then we can split the cost. Or, I will keep the originals and you can pay for the whole digitizing because you're asking for it. So there's a bunch of different ways to split this up.
Yeah. Wonderful. That's a great example. And I think, just even looking at, like you'd said, Darla, her saying that, I'll take the high road there brings us, I guess, to our second point that you were raising of the four.
Right.
So what's your advice and what are your points that you've got as far as the second things to consider, which is the moral side of it?
Yeah, so that moral and emotional may feel like the same thing while you're going through the divorce, but it's really not. Because the moral the moral high ground will always be the moral high ground, and you may have dips and valleys, valleys and hills in your emotional state, right? But I think the moral high ground is, look, you've built this life together for however long, and your history becomes your history. And I'll give you an example. When I split from my husband, actually, he had basically a shoebox of letters from my childhood friends. I never saw them again. He burned them. I don't know what he did with them. It doesn't, it would have been something that would have been easy to digitize. They were letters, not photos, but same idea, same exact process. So I never saw that again. That, it seemed petty to me that he wouldn't return those. On the other hand, I had some things of his grandfather's and, some coins, some foreign coins and that sort of thing. I didn't want them, but I certainly wasn't going to set them on fire. So I paid to put them in a box and ship them back. And, I just always felt okay about doing that. And this was, by the way, I had no money at this point to do that. I probably used my last $50 to ship them to him. But I knew that I could not I could not abuse him of having these family memories. And sometimes when you've been with somebody for a while, you actually assume their family memory or their family photos. So I can think of a family that I'm working with right now. They're not divorcing, but, they are going through this huge effort to scan I've scanned all their photos. I've moved everything in her family and his family into one iCloud account, iCloud Photos account. And so now their histories are kind of merged. And so that sometimes happens with photo collections, is that his and hers will at some point get merged.
To pull that out is difficult.
Once
they're all merged in. Yeah,
because I routinely deal with collections that go back into the late 1800s and early 1900s, and when you go back that far, you're going to be picking up somebody else's history.
Yeah. And just on the point that you made, Della, I just wanted to add to, unfortunately, I've been through a similar situation to you. And look, I would just advise listeners, if they're going through this or if they know someone going through this, in that sort of a situation, say with you, Della, with the childhood, letters and things like that. I know that when there is a split and a separation, emotions are very raw, and so that moral ground can sort of get wavered. Just
Yes.
those actions can be a reaction
Mhm.
and things like that. So these types of things, I think, even if you don't want to give them back, and it is very painful and it is a difficult and sensitive situation, just to put them aside and not make those decisions even about the photos
Yes.
now, at that time, and wait a year or
Yep.
two, or but just stand on your own moral ground for what you say. Like you're probably glad that you did do that, obviously, with your, with his grandfather's things or some of those memorabilia. But once it's done, and you can't. And so, in the heat of the moment, which may last a few years, even or longer, it's very difficult for people to go through that. But yeah, my advice would be just to hold on to them then, and don't make the decisions yet.
Yes, I would just underscore what you just said 1,000%, because it's so
Yeah.
hard to be there in the moment. It hurts so
Yeah.
much.
And to take that moral, stand when emotions, like you say, they're separate, but they're overriding,
Yeah.
those
Mhm.
decisions.
Yeah. So then we look at, your emotional health and where you are emotionally. And I can think of another client, we'll call her Winnie. And she had gone through a divorce. She had gone through a divorce right before I met her, and I was doing some organizing work for her. She called me and said, "We have to get down in the basement. We've had a flood." And unfortunately, she had moved since the divorce, and when she moved, she put a lot of things in the basement in this rental. And again, emotions were still pretty raw. She didn't really want to see pictures of her ex, which we've all been there, I'm sure. So all of her photos were in the basement, and it was in this rental that was kind of an old house, and she had this flood, and she lost so many pictures. They were, of course, we know now that even in a flood, not all is not lost. You can recover some of those pictures. But they were mildewed, they were stuck together, they were just in really bad shape. And so her situation was, because she was emotionally raw, she didn't keep her photos. She didn't do what she needed to protect her photos, to keep them in her living space and keep them safe. And so they ended up getting destroyed, kind of through neglect, but it was really because she was so hurt from the divorce. And so that's another, just one of many, many examples I can give you of how emotions can change your relationships with your photos as well.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good example. It is. And yeah, hard sometimes to make those decisions, at the heat of the moment, or, ongoing. But again, we're looking, as organizers ourselves, our heart behind this is really to just keep that legacy, save those things, think ahead,
Right.
as much as possible. And that's, sadly an example of that.
Yeah. I have another example sort of dealing with that emotional part. And it kind of goes into I kind of called it genealogical or family history, family relationships, which is the next point. But when so my story has a happy ending, right? So 20 years ago, I got divorced, but I did find another love, and we now have two wonderful children. And the last move that we made, which was several years ago now, I moved. I was at that point, I was a professional organizer, and one of the boxes that we moved into our new home was my wedding album from, gosh, it's almost 30 years ago now. And so if you remember, I don't know when you guys, the ladies, got married, but when I got married 30 years ago, every bride would purchase this really thick, leather-bound, heavy album with the portraits they weren't just in an album, they were literally glued in
Yeah.
a leather-bound page. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Yes,
I've seen
absolutely.
them.
Yeah.
So just as I'm describing it, you've probably seen it before. If you're young enough, your parents have one. Go find it and look at it. It'll be
Yeah.
blast from the
They're
past.
beautiful albums. They are beautiful.
They are beautiful and they're very high quality and all of that. But I had this really thick album that, for my first marriage. And I called my mother and I said, Mom, I have been married now for over 10 years to the love of my life. And we have moved this heavy wedding album from my first marriage. We have moved this to I don't know how many houses, and I'm not doing it anymore. And I said, you paid for this. I want to throw it out. I want to get rid of it, but I feel like I need your permission. And she said, okay, well, hang on, let me call you back. So about 10 minutes later, I guess she needed to pull herself together and have a cup of coffee. I don't know what she was doing in the background, but she called me back and she said, Darla, if you're ready to part with it, then I think I should be too. And so I said, great, that's all I needed. And I took one of the pages apart, and it was like, it was the hardest thing I've had to do. It was like the worst trying to get into that leather-bound page. And I pulled one of the photos out that had everybody who was there, all the family, all the bridesmaids, whatever. So I just have one print from that event and I tossed the rest. So that took me years to get to that point. I mean, that was really an emotional issue for me and for my mom. So there you go. There's another emotional story.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I can imagine that would be freeing, and even just a real food for thought for some people out there. And so
can I ask a question though? You didn't have children from that marriage. That came later, is that right?
Right, that's right.
It's not like you threw out your children's father's wedding photos.
No,
because in not in actually my family, another family, they were like a lot of siblings, and two of the siblings got divorced, but they both had children from that first marriage.
Yeah.
And they feel really, really strongly about. We wanted to put together a family album going back years and years, and they just simply refused to put photos in there from their first wedding, even though it would have been it was the dads of these people. And it's like, but they felt really strong about it, and we of course respected that. But what do you say to people who just want to throw everything out because they're so hurt, and even after 20, 30 years, it's not like it happened yesterday, and they have children, they kind of throw out the legacy because it's
that and that gets into the fourth point, is sort of family history / genealogical, whatever you want to call it. Same thing. I have another client who's very much like your family, Chantal. There's it's her and 3 siblings, and all of her siblings have been divorced at some point, and they've all had children with the first spouse. And I'm lucky enough to work with my client she's gone back and she's done a set of albums for each decade. It's been a really fun project. So we did, we did the 2000s, we did the 1990s, 1980s. And in each of those, she had to make the decision, am I going to keep my sibling's first spouse in the album? And we talked it through, she thought it through, and in the end, this is still part of your family's history. You may not love that person anymore. That person may be a wackadoo, that person may be crazy and may have caused a lot of pain, but in the end, it's still your niece's mom or your niece's father, something like that. And so, while the inclination might be, can we crop them out? Even if it's just one picture that shows your history. And that's what I did with my wedding album. I didn't keep it all. I just kept one picture. And I'll tell you something, my kids don't even know this part about my history yet. They're still younger, and it's not like I'm hiding it. It just never came up, right? Because I don't, I don't have a history prior to them, because, who,
Yeah.
you know how kids think. Kids don't believe that
Yeah.
parents are people or that teachers are people.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
So,
Yes.
so at any rate, I feel pretty strongly, and I will have a straight up conversation with my clients often about, look, this may not have been a great time in your life, but it is a part of your family history. You don't have to glorify it. You don't have to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I certainly don't want to go to any expense to try and get somebody out of the picture. On the other hand, I will say, funny story, same exact client I was just telling you about with her siblings. Her daughter recently got married. Her daughter and the spouse actually got an annulment. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's
yes.
Yeah.
okay. So it's like a divorce only cleaner. It's like it never happened. It's a do-over. So her daughter got an annulment, and after that happened, we actually have gone in and we have had the angry spouse photoshopped out of several family photos.
Wow.
But that was okay because they annulled it. You know, there were no children, and he was so evil, you know, in their mind that they wanted to enjoy all of the family parties that they had without having to look at his face
That
in
memory.
their family photos. So
Fair
there
enough.
you go.
Yeah.
Wow, it's like the modern day, tearing that photo in half,
Right.
Yes. It's
but a
actually
little easier, I guess,
Yes.
digitally.
it's interesting what you said before, Darla, about the children. Because I'm actually just going through my own photos from when I was, you know, in my early 20s, late teens, where they are obviously printed and now they're being digitized, and I threw out a whole heap of photos, and the kids sort of, you know, helped a bit. And they're like, who is that? So they had discovered photos of my ex, but we were never married, but, you know, lived together for a while and all that.
Right.
And I kept like only one or two, not because I feel close to him or anything, not at all. But it's that legacy aspect. It was, you know, part of my life, and it was like for 8 years, which is quite a considerable time. So I feel like I don't just want to throw them out because it was a part of my life, and at the time it was an important part of my life. So, but as you did the same with your wedding album, one or two is enough. We don't need more. So, but it's been what Fiona said before. It's been really freeing and liberating, and it felt great. But, you know, it's like almost 20 years have passed since we split up. So sometimes I also think that it helps to have a distance in between the actual, you know, when it happens, and just wait for a while till you are in that right space and can make good decisions. But not everyone has the luxury of that when you're in the middle of a split up and you need to action it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, having that time and distance can really give you a perspective that you didn't have, you know, when you were in your 20s or early 30s, and, you know, emotions were always running high. And, you know, the other thing is for us now, I'm in my 40s right now. And so my volume of physical pictures, I haven't counted, but it's probably, you know, I probably have 3,000 physical pictures that I'm dealing with from high school through when we started taking digital pictures. On the other hand, and I'm not making this up, I have 65,000 digital photos. Now, some of them are blog pictures. They're not all family pictures. But even if the number is half that, you know, 3,000 printed pictures versus 30,000 digital pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, just the volume of digital pictures that we have today, you know, you're not going to go through and spend time. Most people will not spend time paring down, you know, their history of their digital pictures with their ex. It's just not. It's just not a good use of our time. I'd rather my clients be out living, you know, and those digital pictures can just stay on a hard drive. You don't ever have to look at them, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's so much easier.
But, as we get older, or as we get time to ourselves, or as we want to share our personal history, I at one point do want to put together a book of, and my girls are getting into their teens now. They're starting to ask about what we were like as teenagers, or what we were like, or first apartments and that sort of thing. And so I probably will put together an album at some point for them that tells my history before they came along. But I don't, I'm not going to spend a lot of time deleting and getting rid of digital pictures. There's just so many other things that I want to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's your sort of experience and advice as far as we've touched on it, we've talked about it throughout throughout the conversations, but just in relation to that legacy or the genealogical side of going through a separation and advice, or your comments and thoughts on that part.
Yeah, I think that there's a natural, okay, so let me say this. I think that, first of all, the millennial generation is very different. And, you can Google millennials, and there's going to be all these articles about how this generation is different, right? Yeah. I think the main difference that I see is that if something doesn't exist on their phone, it likely doesn't exist in their world. Okay. So I think what that means for us as parents of millennials, and as, aunts and uncles of millennials, is that, that right now, if something isn't digitally consumable for them, that it probably doesn't have a lot of meaning. However, I know what I was like as a teenager. I know what I was like as a 20-year-old person, as a 30-year-old person. You're busy building your life then. You're not necessarily tuned into your family history and your genealogy and where everybody came from, and, the cool stories that your parents haven't told you yet. You're not really tuned into that when you're busy building your first adult life. As I got more interested in that, as my grandmother got older, as she started to slide into dementia, I got really interested in my family history and the stories that I knew were not going to be around much longer. And so what I would say, if you're contemplating how much time and energy to put into your own collection right now, is just because your young person in your life doesn't value your collection today doesn't mean that they will never value it. But they are going to want something that's consumable, right? They're going to want something. They're not going to want 65,000 digital photos of your lunch, right? They're going to want a couple of books or a couple of shoe boxes, hopefully not actual shoe boxes. Hopefully they're archival quality storage for your photos. But they're going to want, a reasonable amount of photos that they can get their head around. And that is the same if you're going through a split, a divorce. Your kids aren't going to want a box full of junk that they can't understand. They're going to want, the word we use a lot now is curated. They're going to want something they can hold in their hands that tells a story. You don't have to tell that story right now in the middle of your divorce. But what I'm saying is, hold on to your photos and your spouse's photos if you become the caretaker for them, or, any of that. Hold on to that long enough for your kids to grow a little bit and to grow into adult people who might have an interest in that.
That's a really great point.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. Wow, that's a lot of amazing information. That's so great, Darla. I'm so grateful for your experience and your just your openness to share. If someone's sort of at the heat of the moment and they're sort of, they've tuned in and they've decided to listen to this podcast episode, what sort of main tips or, sort of highlights would you give as advice from either professionally or personally, that you would say, just that, just some quick takeaways that they could really use?
So I would suggest two things right up front. One is, if you suspect that you might be splitting soon, or if you already know that you are splitting, go grab your digital photos. Okay. And I don't mean grab them as in, like taking them away from your spouse. I just mean, make sure you know where they are. So that, if your spouse does leave the property and that computer that all your family photos live on goes with him or her, that you're not traumatized a second time. Okay.
Yep.
So that would be number one. I know when I got divorced that like the first thing I did was lock down all the bank accounts. So
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing, right?
Yep.
So that would be number one. And number two would be, if you are getting support from a counselor, a mediator, an attorney, say to the, if it's something that's important to you, if your family photos are important to you, bring it up, talk to them.
Yeah.
And not from the standpoint of, I'm going to fight about this, but just, is there a way, I think we can make this easy. I just want to make sure that everybody gets treated fairly. Let's make sure that if there's a cost to either gathering or digitizing our family archive, that, that gets cared for in the divorce decree, in the agreement that we come to, so that you're not left holding the bag. Because I think not enough people actually have this conversation as they're getting divorced. And then, it's like, right, palm to forehead later, like, oh, darn, I should have asked for that one.
Exactly. I totally agree with that, Darla, and I really do, which is why I think, it's so wonderful to have this conversation together, because even just bringing awareness to, people that are listening, for their people in their world, to say, hey, have you thought about this? Because it is right. It's, it's not at that moment that people, it's later when they go, oh, I could have put that in, or I could have had that conversation.
Right.
So it is, bringing that awareness to getting that support to say something up front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and probably the last thing I would say is what my grandmother always said, this too shall pass. If you are listening, or you think you might be going through this in the future, life goes on. Even, the worst case scenario might be for somebody that their photos are taken from them, or, they have a gap in their photo history. And you know what? They are photos. They're important. Certainly I'm in this business because I want to help people, protect their memories and their special moments, but they are just photos, and you will get through this season in your life, and there are better things around the corner. That is for darn sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's fantastic. That's a perfect way to wrap up, I think, our advice and our thoughts on this. And look, Della, we're just so grateful for your insight. Thank you so much for joining us on our DIY photo organizing podcast. And I really hope that, that's shed some light and just opened up some topics of conversation and some suggestions and ideas for the listeners. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. Really been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So look, everyone, we'd just love to remind you, jump over to the show notes and you can read more about Darla, have a look at her great things. Sign up, please, for her newsletter. It's so useful, so many great tips and great, topics that she talks about, blogging and things like that in her blog. So please go over and have a look at Darla. Darla's information at heartworkorg.com. And thanks again for listening. Thank you, Chantal.
Thank you, ladies. Thanks so much,
Darla. Really appreciate it. Okay, take care.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of DIY Photo Organizing and found some inspiration, useful tips and strategies to support your photo projects.
We'd love to invite you to pop over to our Facebook page, DIY Photo Organizing, and we welcome your questions, feedback, and any future topics that you'd like us to cover. If there is someone you'd love to share this with, please click on Share to help others take control of their photos too. Remember, have a look through our show notes for links to helpful information. I'm Fiona from Photo Helper.
And I'm Chantal from Simply in Order Photo Organizing. And remember, we believe in you and you can do this.